Hello, I'm Anne Junor. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of the Economic and Labour Relations Review. The ELRR is Australia's home of heterodox economics, and we pride ourselves on publishing research that develops rights, equality and justice-based approaches to labour relations and social policy in an economic context. I'm here today to celebrate two of our authors who do just this. They're Dr. Chris F. Wright and Dr. Stephen Clibborn, the winners of the journal's inaugural Nevile Plowman Award for Best Paper for 2020. Chris, Stephen, congratulations and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Anne.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. It's a real honour to be nominated and to receive this, and from this journal and in honour of David Plowman and John Nevile.
Thank you. And I'd also like to introduce Dr. Di Kelly, who chaired the awarding panel for this year's prize.
Hello, Anne. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm absolutely delighted to be part of the panel for choosing the prize. It was set out in order to highlight the excellence of research in the ELRR, and it certainly has achieved that. We had about a dozen major nominations covering all sorts of events and analysis in Europe, Eastern Europe, capitalism after communism, Australian basic income and so on. But the clear winner was the paper by Chris Wright and Stephen Clibborn, A Guest Worker State, the Declining Power and Agency of Migrant Labour in Australia. And the authors just did such a terrific job in terms of the criteria of the prize, that it offered an original approach. It demonstrated extremely high standards of research. It is clear and accessible. The framework that they use, discussing residency status, mobility, skill thresholds, and institutional protection to analyse, both in a historical and comparative perspective, bargaining power and agency for migrant labour from basically the history of Australia. They start in the early years, and it's a long time since I've seen reference to ex parte H.V. Mackay, but they go back to those earliest years of migrant labour in Australia, then focus much of the paper on migrant labour in the 1970s and 80s through to 96, and then from the marked change that has occurred since 1996. Covering those aspects of residency status, workers' mobility and capacity, their skill threshold, and institutional protection available to those workers. And they demonstrate brilliantly the seeming inexorable shift to reducing power and agency for migrant workers in a very clear and accessible manner. So you've got this great research, but it's not pompous, it's not obscure, it is very clear, and even diagrams to help visual thinkers like me. But it's not just a rigorous piece of work with a strong research base and a clear framework, but it also at the end considers some of the possibilities. If we go down the path of being a migrant worker state, a guest worker state, sorry, then what are the consequences and what could be done? So they conclude by looking at restrictions on temporary migrants' pathways and in ways that we could avoid the issues and huge problems that accrue from having guest worker status. All in all, it is a wonderful, rigorous, interdisciplinary piece, covers economics, labour and political history, social science analysis. It's ideal for the inaugural Nevile Plowman Prize, and I'm delighted to have been the chair of the committee and delighted that it's won. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you so much, Di. I mean, we were thrilled to get the article published in the Economic and Labour Relations Review, and it's just such an honour to receive this award.
Chris and Stephen, can you tell us why you came to write the paper and why you think the issues it covers are so important?
Well, I might just say briefly, I think the piece is a product of both our joint and our collaborative work. So we've been working together for quite a while around this issue, but our starting points are somewhat different. My interest in migrant worker issues was originally around how policy had changed and the factors that had driven policy change in Australia. And Stephen was really one of the first, if not the first researcher in Australia to really look at some of the visa categories that hadn't received much attention, like especially international students who played a very important role in the workforce, but whose status wasn't really recognised. And I think the more we got into this area, the more we realised that the rhetoric around policy relating to migrant workers didn't really match the reality. The rhetoric was that Australia had never had a guest worker system of migration, where there were clear inequities and in the categories of visas that were created between temporary migrants and permanent residents, and a reality that these disparities did exist and were deepening in many ways, and that's really the genesis of this paper, was that the rhetoric around Australia not being a guest worker system or state wasn't reflected in the content of the policies and in the outcomes of policies. And Stephen's work in particular really draws attention to the importance of those outcomes.
I'll now hand over to Peter Sheldon to explain a little bit about the background to the award.
Thank you, Anne and Di, and congratulations to Chris and Stephen. It's so wonderful that we're able to publish a paper of this quality, this standard, and this social relevance and impact in our journal. It really makes the purpose of the journal really clear, and really furthers our mission as editors of the journal. So it's the inaugural prize for best paper. It's named in honour of Emeritus Professor John Nevile and the late Professor David Plowman. And these two professors, who were long-standing professors at UNSW, from the economics and industrial relations disciplines respectively, founded the journal in 1990 and established its social justice perspective. John Nevile, currently the journal's patron, was honoured in an 80th birthday Festschrift, 80th birthday Festschrift, in one of the first issues of the journal to be published by Sage back in 2013. As an economist with a cool head and a warm heart, for many years he was a very, very active part of the editorial team. David Plowman passed away at the end of that year, very tragically, very sadly for all of us who knew him and had worked with him or had stood on his shoulders as researchers. And an article celebrating his contribution to IR and an article celebrating his contribution to IR can be found in our March 2014 issue. Both John Nevile and David Plowman were enormously generous colleagues, supportive. They were leaders, but also quiet leaders, generous in everything they do and did, and of a school of academics that really brought both rigour and heart to their work. It's also a happy coincidence, although one that is unknown to those who voted to nominate the winning article, that David Plowman was himself an immigrant. He came to Australia from Malta as an unaccompanied 10-year-old child migrant. So it is, enormously fitting that that they are honoured by our journal. They really are people on whose shoulders we stand. It's enormously fitting also that this first award goes to two excellent scholars who have done enormously good work that brings together economics, labour relations, some law, in something so relevant to the sorts of issues that they also were enormously passionate about and concerned to examine. Thank you.
So Di, would you like to formally make the award?
Yes, Chris and Stephen, on behalf of everybody, I'd like to formally award you the Nevile Plowman Prize for 2020 for your wonderful article on the guest worker state. And I'd like to extend my heartiest congratulations to you both for such a good article. It was terrific. Congratulations and thank you very much.
So thank you everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your participation. And just to let all viewers know that SAGE are ungating the article for several weeks, and so it will be freely accessible on the website to people outside the academic community. So thank you, everybody.